the breath you've been using wrong. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. You've been breathing your entire life, and somehow still doing it badly. Not badly like wrong technique, badly like unconscious. You inhale, exhale, repeat, while your mind runs commentary like a sports channel that never turns off. You call this living. The nervous system calls it low-grade emergency mode. And here's the part no one likes to hear. Your breath is not just air, it's instruction. Every breath tells your body who's in charge. Every breath tells your brain whether the world is safe or hostile, or something to be conquered before coffee. Most people breathe like they're late for a life they don't even enjoy. And then they wonder why their thoughts loop, emotions spike, and calm feels like a rumor other people spread online. Breathe. Now listen carefully. There is a specific class of breathing that doesn't calm you by force. It doesn't sedate you. It doesn't distract you with bliss. It reorganizes control, not spiritually, not emotionally, structurally. This is where ancient wisdom accidentally embarrassed modern psychology by thousands of years. Because long before brain scans, people noticed something strange. When the breath alternates sides, the mind stops choosing sides. Thoughts lose their grip. Emotions stop arguing. The inner narrator goes quiet, not because you silenced it, but because it no longer has a dominant microphone. This is not relaxation. This is rebalancing authority. And the reason it works is almost annoying in its simplicity. Your brain is divided. Your nervous system is divided. Your attention is divided. But your breath can't lie. When you alternate it deliberately, slowly, evenly, you force systems that love dominance into cooperation. No side gets to run the show. No pattern gets to hijack the moment. No habit gets reinforced long enough to feel inevitable. This is why this breath feels subtle, and why it's dangerous to systems that thrive on reactivity. Because a balanced nervous system is boring, and boring people don't panic by identities. You won't feel high. You won't feel special. You won't feel spiritual. You'll feel centered. And centered people are hard to push. Breathe. By the end of this series, you'll understand why this single practice affects mood, clarity, decision-making, emotional regulation, perception of time, and even how reality seems to respond to you. Not because reality is mystical, but because you finally stopped oscillating long enough to see it clearly. This is not about becoming calm. It's about becoming unavailable to internal chaos. Breathe to that. Why the mind stops fighting when the breath alternates. Here's something strangely inconvenient for your inner chaos. Your mind doesn't calm down because you ask it nicely. It calms down when it loses structural support. Most people think thoughts are powerful. They're not. They're repetitive. What gives them power is dominance. One pattern firing again, and again, and again, until it feels like truth. Overthinking is not intelligence. It's hemispheric monopoly. One side of the brain grabs the wheel and never lets go. Logic loops, emotion floods. Narratives repeat like a badly written series that somehow got renewed for 10 seasons. And you're sitting there wondering why just letting go doesn't work, because nothing ever let go of you. Breathe. Now here's the mechanism most people never hear. Your brain evolved to alternate. Left, right. Sympathetic, parasympathetic, action, regulation. But modern life rewards imbalance. Deadlines, screens, notifications, performance, comparison. So one side dominates, and the mind starts narrating instead of perceiving. This is where alternate nostril breathing becomes quietly disruptive. When you consciously switch the airflow, you're not just moving air. You are forcing hemispheric handoff. Left side inhales, right side exhales, then reversed. Over and over. The brain hates this at first, because it can't predict which network will be in charge next. Prediction is how the ego survives. No prediction, no storyline. This is why, after a few minutes, thoughts don't disappear. They just stop convincing you. They show up like background noise. Still there, but not in charge. You didn't suppress the mind, you out-coordinated it. Think of it like two people arguing when suddenly the microphone starts switching hands every few seconds. The argument doesn't escalate, it collapses. No villain, no winner, just silence. And silence here isn't mystical, it's structural. Your nervous system is no longer feeding one dominant loop enough energy to stay alive. This is also why emotions start to flatten, not disappear. You don't feel numb, you feel even, which, to a system addicted to spikes, feels suspicious. People say, "I don't feel anything happening." Good. Nothing dramatic means nothing is hijacking you. Breathe. This is the difference between calming the surface and stabilizing the architecture underneath. And once the architecture stabilizes, perception changes on its own. Not because you forced peace, but because the war ran out of fuel. Breathe to that. The vagus nerve, the observer, and why calm is not the goal. Here's where people usually misunderstand what's happening. They think the goal is calm. Calm is just a side effect. What's actually changing is who is observing. Breathe. Inside your body, there's a negotiation happening every second. Between speed and safety. Between urgency and regulation. Between reaction and response. The referee of that negotiation is a long wandering nerve called the vagus nerve. It doesn't care about your affirmations. It doesn't read your books. It listens to signals. Breath is one of the loudest signals it receives. When breathing is shallow, rushed, uneven, the vagus hears, threat not resolved. And it does exactly what it's designed to do. Tighten, accelerate, scan, react. You call that anxiety. The body calls it duty. Now here's the part that matters. Alternate nostril breathing does not just activate the vagus. It trains its flexibility. Instead of one long parasympathetic wave that sedates you, you get rhythmic modulation. Up, down, switch, regulate, switch. This teaches the nervous system something rare. I can change state without collapsing. That's vagal tone, not how relaxed you feel, but how quickly and cleanly you can move between states without losing coherence. A system with poor vagal tone panics when challenged. A system with strong vagal tone adapts without drama. This is why calm alone is not power. Calm that shatters under pressure is decorative. What you're training here is resilience. Breathe. Now let's connect this to consciousness, because this is where it gets interesting. When vagal tone stabilizes, the brainstem stops screaming for attention. Survival signals quiet down, and something subtle happens. Awareness detaches from urgency. You're still present, still thinking, still sensing, but you're no longer glued to every signal. This is what ancient texts pointed at when they talked about the witness. not a mystical soul floating above the body. Just awareness no longer hijacked by threat chemistry. The observer doesn't appear because you searched for it. It appears because nothing is pulling it anymore. That's why insight often shows up after breathing practices. Not because the breath creates wisdom, but because noise stopped drowning it out. And yes, this is where people start projecting cosmic meaning onto a very practical shift. The observer isn't special. It's just unoccupied. No urgency, no chase, no reaction loop demanding commentary. Breathe. So when people say this breath makes them feel clear, what they really mean is, I'm no longer being narrated by my nervous system. And once narration quiets, something radical happens. Reality stops feeling personal, not cold, not distant, just unhooked. Which is terrifying to identities built on constant reaction and freeing to everything else. Breathe to that. Coherence, resonance, and why reality feels different after. Here's where people start whispering words like energy, and everyone else rolls their eyes. So let's ruin that reaction properly. Breathe. Your body is not just chemistry. It's chemistry moving in rhythm, every heartbeat, every breath, every neural signal. Rhythm is not decoration. Rhythm is coordination. When rhythms inside you are incoherent, life feels noisy. Decisions feel heavy. People feel irritating for no obvious reason. The world feels slightly hostile, even on a good day. You call that mood. Physics calls it interference. Now here's the key idea most people never hear. Coherence does not mean feeling good. It means signals agreeing. Heart rhythm agrees with breath rhythm. Breath rhythm agrees with neural timing. Neural timing agrees across hemispheres. When those line up, something subtle but profound happens. You stop leaking attention. Breathe. Alternate nostril breathing forces this alignment by design. Not by emotion, not by belief, by rhythm. Switch, regulate, switch, regulate. The system can't fragment when timing is synchronized. This is why ancient traditions talked about channels opening. They weren't seeing light shows. They were feeling resistance drop. Less friction, less internal argument, less wasted motion. Modern science measures this as increased coherence in heart rate variability, stabilized oscillations in neural networks, and smoother autonomic transitions. Ancient wisdom called it flow. Same thing, different vocabulary, less marketing. Now here's the part that messes with people. When internal coherence increases, the observer effect kicks in. Not the misunderstood pop quantum version, the practical one. You perceive differently when you're not internally scrambled. You notice patterns faster. You respond instead of react. You choose with less hesitation. And suddenly people say things like, reality feels smoother. No, you became smoother. Reality didn't change its rules. Your interaction with it stopped glitching. Breathe. This is why coherent people often appear lucky. They're not blessed. They're aligned. They don't fight timing. They don't force outcomes. They don't leak energy into internal conflict. They move cleanly, which is extremely annoying to systems built on friction. Here's the quiet truth. The world does not respond to your intentions. It responds to your signal quality. Incoherent signal equals noise. Coherent signal equals clarity. Alternate nostril breathing improves signal quality by doing something radical. It removes bias. No side dominant, no pattern in control. No emotion amplifying itself unchecked, just presence, evenly distributed. This is why you don't feel high afterward. You feel accurate. And accuracy doesn't sparkle, it stabilizes. Breathe. The more coherent you become, the less dramatic life needs to be to get your attention. And that's the beginning of real freedom. Not escape, not transcendence. Just no longer being dragged by internal static. Breathe to that. Why the system doesn't want you balanced. This is where things get slightly uncomfortable. Not mystical uncomfortable. Structural uncomfortable. Breathe. A balanced nervous system is efficient. Efficient systems don't overreact. They don't spiral. They don't buy solutions for problems they no longer feel. Which raises an awkward question. If balance is so good for you, why is it so rare? It's not because people are lazy. It's because imbalance is useful. An unregulated system is predictable. Predictable systems are steerable. If your emotions swing easily, you can be nudged. If your attention fractures quickly, it can be captured. If your identity depends on reaction, it can be marketed to. This isn't a conspiracy. It's just economics mixed with nervous systems. Dysregulated people generate movement. Movement generates consumption. Consumption keeps stories alive. Balanced people pause, and pause is a problem. Breathe. Notice how almost everything around you is designed to keep oscillation going. Urgency, outrage, hope followed by disappointment, promise followed by delay. It's a rhythm, and rhythms entrain nervous systems whether you consent or not. This is why stillness feels threatening at first. The moment the noise drops, you feel exposed, not unsafe, just unoccupied. That's when identities get nervous, because identity survives by contrast. I am this because I am not that. I matter because I react. I exist because I feel strongly. Alternate nostril breathing interrupts this loop without attacking it. It doesn't argue with the system. It simply stops feeding it. No spike, no crash, no story, just regulation. And regulation is boring, which is exactly why it works. Breathe. Here's the irony. People think freedom feels explosive. It doesn't. It feels quiet enough that the mind says, "Is this it?" Yes, that's it. No fireworks. No enlightenment badge. Just no internal leash. Balanced nervous systems don't cling to extremes. They don't need villains or saviors. They don't demand meaning every 5 minutes. They function. And functionality is deeply subversive in a world built on stimulation. This is why practices that truly regulate are rarely trendy. They don't give you an identity upgrade. They remove your dependency on one, which is bad for branding. Breathe. So if this practice ever feels underwhelming, remember, that's not failure. That's withdrawal. The system is losing its grip. And once it does, it doesn't fight you. It just can't use you the same way anymore. Which is the closest thing to liberation most people will ever experience. Quietly, without applause. Breathe to that. The exit is not escape, it's stability. Now we arrive at the part people usually misunderstand, and then try to decorate. So let's not decorate it. But before that, if you want to experience this rather than think about it, I've designed a Nadi Shodhana alternate breathing meditation. It's in the meditation playlist on my channel, and will be recommended at the end of this video. No belief required, just try it. Trust me. Breathe. Most practices promise an escape. Transcend the body, leave the mind, rise above the world. That language sounds impressive. It's also unnecessary, because nothing here required you to leave anything. You didn't escape the mind. You stopped feeding its loops. You didn't transcend the body. You regulated it. You didn't rise above the world. You became less reactive inside it. And that's the real exit. Not out of reality, out of compulsion. Breathe. Here's the quiet ending most teachings avoid. When the nervous system stabilizes, the search stops. Not because you found the answer, but because the question dissolved. You don't ask, "Who am I?" when nothing inside is demanding an identity. You don't ask, "What's my purpose?" when action no longer comes from agitation. You don't ask, "How do I manifest?" when you're no longer leaking energy into resistance. This is not awakening as a peak experience. This is awakening as baseline clarity. And clarity doesn't shout, it observes. Breathe. At this stage, something subtle happens to your relationship with life. You still feel joy. You still feel sadness. You still think, plan, care. But none of it owns you. Experience passes through instead of sticking. The observer isn't watching life like a movie. The observer is simply no longer hijacked by narration. Ancient texts called this silence. Science calls it regulation. Physics would call it low-noise signal processing. Same state, different excuses. And here's the final irony. The moment you stop trying to change yourself, change becomes effortless. Because effort was the noise. Alternate nostril breathing didn't give you something new. It removed interference. And when interference drops, what remains doesn't need improvement. It functions. It responds. It sees. Breathe. So if you take anything from this series, let it be this. You are not broken. You are not blocked. You are not asleep. You were just overstimulated and out of rhythm. And rhythm can be restored. Quietly, mechanically, without belief. No symbols required. No identity upgrade necessary. Just breath. Alternating. Steady. Honest. And the rest reorganizes itself. Not because you forced it, but because nothing is fighting anymore. Breathe to that.